Okay, Israel Museum is filled with artifacts, including many from Beth Shan. You've been there, you know what's there. There's a basalt piece showing some lions. And of course, what I want us to remember is that when we read Genesis, do we read about Hittites over and over? And not just Genesis. Hittites are part of the Bible.
Okay.
And yet, there was no evidence of there ever being Hittites. The Bible was ridiculed for a long time because this is a civilization that didn't ever really exist. Bible writers made them up. And so that was the thinking for a long time. This is after the beginning of archaeology. So archaeology is our best friend, and yet it was our worst enemy at one time. Because they're finding all these things, and yet they're not finding anything about Hittites. And so they said, the Bible's wrong.
Yeah.
And yet now you can go to Ankara in Turkey. You can go to the Hittite Museum there.
Wow.
You can find tons of artifacts. They're here as well. So, no, there were Hittites. Yeah, the Bible was proved right again. Let's go. The Egyptians, of course, like all the people around the world, they have their gods. Gods, plural. In Egypt, in ancient Egypt, the number of gods is just beyond number. But some were considered creator gods, more important gods. Amun-Re, for example. Here's a Amun-Re household god that you would use, you could worship, you could use to show ownership.
Oh.
Do you remember the story of Rachel hiding the household gods? And her father searched for them, and she said, well, I can't get up, as it is with women sometimes, and she had them hidden. And the gods proved some ownership, and so she stole them out of, I guess, greed, and paid the penalty. Well, we have a lot of Egyptian archaeology here, including the images of pharaohs. And of course, Pharaoh means great house. Remember that pharaohs owned all the land. The people were all subject to Pharaoh. When did that begin? It may have begun with Joseph. Remember, if you read Genesis, Joseph had a plan. He had the dreams from God.
I do remember.
So you have the very abundant years and then the very lean years. So for 7 years, crops were abundant. And because he had been in that prison, but then interpreted Pharaoh's dream, he was making second in command of the entire land, and he had a plan. And basically, by the end of that story, all the people starving without food from Pharaoh. So he passed out the food that Joseph had stored in the storehouses. And so during the 7 lean years, they gave up ownership of everything. And so we know that Pharaohs owned all the land, all the people in effect. And that may have started with Joseph. Sarah, I told you that when I was in Jerusalem, I visited with a fellow raised a Christian in Texas, and he gave it up for Islam. And much of his reason, he believes the Bible can't be believed because there was no writing back when Moses wrote. Well, we know this kid from 3000 BC, and yet he believes there wasn't writing that really developed fully, properly until the days of Muhammad. We're talking 600 to 700 years after Jesus is born. That shows absolute ignorance of truth, because we have lots of writing, and we know there was writing in the days of Moses, though you can find books from the 1800s that claim that there was no writing in his time. And if there was no writing, then obviously the whole story of Moses going up Mount Sinai, all the 10 plagues, all that couldn't be true. And so this idea that the Bible is not accurate because archaeology proves it's not accurate, that is from an old era. No one would say that today. No one who knows the subject would say that today. No way.
Sure.
Yeah, no way. Sarah, you know Deuteronomy 28, blessings and curses. You honor me, God says, I will bless you. You choose to reject me, olives come off trees, right?
Troubles
Diseases comes, foreign nations come and attack, all kinds of bad things are mentioned. And so the olives are trees, not Deuteronomy 28, but it's in the Old Testament. But because the northern kingdoms, remember the kingdoms divided, we have 10 in the north, and they did reject God. And consequently, it's the Assyrians who come and destroy that nation, take them off into captivity. Bunch of Assyrian kings, Tiglath-Pileser, this one Sargon, Sennacherib, of course, is the king that came, destroyed North Israel, and then came to Judah and destroyed many towns there. 46 towns that were walled cities were destroyed, and it was outside Jerusalem when the Lord acted and destroyed that army.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but we find many different writings from that period of time, 8th century BC. A lot of God's prophets are 8th century BC. Okay. Okay. Let's just, yeah, we'll do the Romans.